and many people around the globe. So I am going to turn off my camera for a moment, and I'll be sharing with you the slide deck. Okay, so like Hassan said, this session is to give you a simple guide to Ramadan, a simple set of insights into what Ramadan means to many people around the globe and the importance of this holy month. I hope this presentation takes no longer than 20 to 30 minutes, and in between, obviously, you will get an opportunity to ask any questions along the way. So let's get started. 4 parts really to this presentation. I want to do a bit of a deep dive into the nitty-gritty of Ramadan and the practices on a day-to-day basis. That will be followed by some useful information about fasting in general. For a lot of people on this call, I think what would be really valuable is guidance for employers. What does it mean to manage a person who's participating in this holy month? And finally, how you or your company may want to get involved in Ramadan. That doesn't necessarily mean that you have to start fasting, but there are other ways and means that you can hopefully get involved with us. So let's look into Ramadan. So like I said to you earlier on, this is going to be a deep dive into the nitty-gritty and the detail. Some of the more obvious, more general kind of discussion points that usually happen around Ramadan and what is involved for an individual when it comes to fasting. So I'm just going to give you 30 seconds, if that's okay, just to glance over this slide. There's a bit of information here, which I think would be useful if you could just have a skim read of first, and then I will go into discuss it in a bit more detail. Okay, so I want to go into a little bit of the why behind Ramadan. Why Muslims fast, why does it exist, and what is the importance of it? So let's start off with, why do we as individuals want to have a better, closer, more meaningful relationship with God, or as we refer to, Allah? And for us, there's a couple of real reasons behind this. One is because we believe that Allah is our maker and he deserves to be worshipped. That's very simple for us. The second reason is that we believe that by having a closer and more meaningful relationship with Allah, it means that overall we can be better human beings. We can have better morals and values. And this intertwines quite closely with having that relationship with Allah, because in a nutshell, there is nothing that contradicts in terms of being a good person and being a good Muslim to a Muslim or to somebody of another faith or no faith. So those are some of the reasons why we want to have a better relationship with Allah. Some may ask, well, why do you have to give up food or drink to have that relationship? And that's a valid question, because in this particular case, Ramadan only occurs once in the whole year for a whole month. So what happens in the other 11 months? Now, this month is special because for us, it's a rare opportunity, which gives us the opportunity to focus. It gives us an opportunity to prioritize what's important in our life. It's a bit of a boot camp at once in a year to re-energize ourselves. And sometimes in life, just like with everything, we do have to make sacrifices along the way. Okay, we do have to make compromises along the way. In our particular case, that compromise and that sacrifice is food and is drink. But by making that sacrifice, actually, it allows us to focus. it allows us to manage our thoughts, our behaviors, and our actions. And in all walks of life, whenever somebody makes a compromise in their life, a sacrifice in their life, generally speaking, it is for a better cause, something that they're aspiring to, something that they want to achieve. So in our particular case, like I said, giving up food and drink allows us to focus, build that relationship. And believe you and me, giving up food and drink isn't easy. You know, I've got a cup of coffee right beside me right now, and I'm ready to have another sip. And, you know, it's going to be tough come a couple of days' time, and I have to give that up. But nevertheless, that is part and parcel of the process. And so that gives you a little bit of an idea as to why we compromise food and drink. And then the final thing that I just want to say with regards to this slide is that fasting in Ramadan is a significant part of our religion. Okay, it is a big part of what we do on a day-to-day basis as Muslims. It's one of the 5 pillars of Islam, and that just shows you the big significance and importance of fasting in general. Okay, so moving on to the next slide, the do's and don'ts of Ramadan. Now, I'm going to start this off with a bit of a caveat because in general, most of these things are universal. They apply on a day-to-day basis. However, because of the things that I mentioned in the previous slide, it does mean that we're a little bit more conscious of our actions and our behaviors. So where I've mentioned here and what have you, these are the things that occur as a result of the focus that we have. But the obvious thing for many people and for many of us is that we can't eat or drink. We cannot consume any sort of food. We cannot consume any sort of drink, okay? And towards the bottom of that image, you can see that the focus on doing something positive, praying 5 times a day, reciting the Quran, what happens is that generally because of the change in attitude and the change in the mindset, we generally want to do good things. We generally want to do practices that are beneficial to us and humanity. And so therefore, our focus and attention changes. So this next slide is really interesting because in my experience in the workplace, generally speaking, this is where a lot of the discussions happen around the detail about when do you fast, when do you finish, how long do you, and so on and so forth. So hopefully I'm going to try and get into some of that now. So Ramadan starts at a different time of the year every year. And for some, that's really difficult to understand. But really and truly, if you understand the concept that the Islamic calendar, which we Muslims, in order to establish when Ramadan occurs, is based on a lunar calendar. A lunar calendar, for those that don't know, is based on the sighting of the moon, okay? So therefore, this is the reason why the date of Ramadan starting changes by 10, it actually comes forward. So for example, this time last year, we would have started Ramadan in early May as opposed to late April, okay? Now, because the sighting of the moon can, sorry, not the sighting of the moon, because a moon can last for anywhere between 29 to 30 days, hence the reason why it's important for us to be able to visually sight the moon to determine when Ramadan starts, when Ramadan finishes, hence the reason why, again, why the dates change. Currently in the UK, it's a long fast. It's that time of the year where the day is very long. So it can be anywhere between 16 to 18 hours. So this image that I've just shown you here gives you an idea of somebody who might be fasting in the London region. So if Ramadan was 4th of April, their fast starts at 4:07 a.m., okay, when the sun rises. And then when the sun sets is at 8:16 p.m. That's an awfully long time. And then as you can see, as the days go by and the weeks go by, the time slightly adjusts based on obviously the sunrise and the sunset and so on and so forth. A typical weekday during Ramadan. Now, I'm going to say that this can be different for different people, depending on your shift patterns, your working circumstances, your setup at home, whatever it might be. But for me personally, this is the kind of setup that I have. So as I mentioned to you on the previous slide, the fasting actually starts the moment the sun actually rises, okay? So I would typically wake up at 3:30 in the morning, and I would basically wake up to have a little meal, also known as suhoor. And this could be anything from a bowl of cereal to a few dates to something larger. It's different for different people. And then I would go back to sleep. So I'd literally be waking up for half an hour just to have something to eat. I know it sounds alien, and it is a little bit, it takes a bit of adjusting, but actually sometimes at that time in the morning, food doesn't taste too bad depending on what you eat. And then I get back into my normal routine. So I'll wake up for work, and I'll get ready at 8 o'clock in the morning, and I'll set off for work. What I will probably say is that most of the items that are not in bold are things that happen on a day-to-day basis. For example, at work, I'll perform my early afternoon prayer. I'll return back from work about 6 o'clock. Now, because my mindset and my focus is on strengthening my relationship with Allah, I will spend some time reading the Quran. I will spend some time pondering over the Quran. I may listen to some YouTube videos, etc., etc. Finally, 8:15, the moment that we've been waiting for, when we can finally have that evening meal, also known as iftar. And this is a real important part of, obviously, where we get to open our fast. And there are other significant moments associated with that time, such as your prayers being. Now, the day up there, because under normal circumstances, we would be going to the mosque to perform prayers as well as supplementary prayers. With the government's advice with the pandemic, the mosques are closed. But most of us will be still undertaking those prayers late into the evening at home. So that gives you an insight into what a typical day looks like. And then exemptions. This is really important. Not everybody has to fast. It's not compulsory on everybody to fast. And I'm just going to quickly run through with you a few people that don't need to fast. Children don't need to fast, okay? People with ill health who are not fit and able and stable mentally to fast are not obliged to fast. People who are traveling within the country, people who are traveling abroad don't have to fast. And women who are coming off the menstrual cycle, who are on the menstrual cycle, who are pregnant, post-childbirth, and so on and so forth. And there's some detail around some of these exemptions which exist. And then finally, to mark the end of Ramadan, we have a big celebration also known as Eid. And this is something you might be accustomed to know because it's usually a time when we all come and ask for our annual leave. And some people take a day off, some people take a couple of days off, a few days off, and on what they've got planned. It's a hectic day, it's a really busy day. It starts off with prayers in the morning. It consists of lots of family and friends getting together. It exists with us exchanging gifts and garments and so on and so forth. A really special day for us and something that we really treasure because it's a real celebration to mark the end of Ramadan. Now, this is the end of the first section. Let's look into Ramadan. I'm going to hand over to Hassan to ask if there's any questions before I move on to the next section. Over to you, Hassan.
Thanks, Abdul Wadud. Yeah, we've had a couple of good questions in. One from Caroline Eglinton, who asks, so I work at Network Rail and we've been asked by facilities teams if they can specify that faith rooms are limited to one user at a time during the COVID-19 crisis and social distancing. I've been asked if this is causing any issues around timing of prayers or anything else that I may not be considering. Thank you. So it's a question about sort of capacity of multi-faith rooms in offices and whether there are issues of allowing people to pray one at a time or small groups.
That's fine. What I'd probably say is, Hassan, if there's any questions that aren't necessarily directly to Ramadan itself, if we can leave those towards the end, that'd be best to cover them. But I'll cover this question. I think, to be honest, it's more than a reasonable request given the circumstances. And I think, I don't believe that it should pose an issue. Just to give you a bit of information, the early afternoon prayer, usually the start time for that is around 1:15, 1:20, I believe. And we have up until approximately 4:30, 5 o'clock to pray that. So even if the individuals within the quadrant were asked to go in one at a time, it's more than understandable and easy for them to spread it out so that nobody is missing the prayer, missing the time that's allocated, and is able to work within the guidelines. I think the key thing here is just to be able to kind of communicate that with them, which I'm sure you have done. And I'd be surprised if people were unable to accommodate that.
And I think it's worth pointing out that that's sort of broadly in line with the guidance from Muslim community bodies and organizations, and also Muslim medical authorities, which I'm sure you're coming to a bit later on. There's one other question as well, which perhaps we can address at the end. It's from Nasir regarding how Ramadan affects mental health in this time. Perhaps do you want to touch on that now or later on?
Yeah, I can touch on that now. So it's a difficult one because Ramadan this year is very different to Ramadan in previous years gone by. So I'll kind of cover off what it probably means in previous years gone by. For a lot of people, I'd probably say that actually one of the biggest challenges that they might have is initially just adjusting. There's a lot going on with life in general, with work in general, but then on top of that, they've had this new priority in their life. So balancing can sometimes be a bit of a challenge. The second thing to mention is that for many people, because they have a shift in mindset and a focus, actually their mental health and well-being, they have a sense of focus and a sense of purpose, and all of a sudden they are, very much alive. So again, it's a real positive for people, a positive time in the month for them. Yeah. I think this year, one thing I'd probably mention, and again, I think it's going to be difficult to comment, but I'll try and cast a view on it, only because it's unprecedented, and I personally, and a lot of people have never experienced it, but for a lot of people, it's going to be a difficult time because Ramadan is usually a time that's spent with our community, with a wider network of people going to the mosques in the evening and opening your fast. So it might become a lonely experience for some people. So that might be a bit challenging given what they've been used to.
Yeah, thank you for that. Just conscious of time, and we can hopefully keep it moving. There's another great question in from Luann. I think you're probably going to answer it through the next section, though. She's asking about how the experience of fasting can make some people tired at work and how to sort of address that. But I'll let you continue. Thanks,
Hassan. Okay, so the second part of this presentation is providing some useful information and insights into fasting. It's just a couple of slides. It's a really short section, so I'm going to go straight into it. Fasting in other communities. Now, what you can see from this table that has a lot of information on there is there's a lot of people historically and currently who have fast or do fast. And it does exist across a vast spectrum of people from different faiths, different geographics, etc. Christians, Buddhists, Jewish people, and everybody has a slightly different criteria of what and how they actually approach it. Now, what I would probably say is, take the opportunity, please, to log onto our website, and I think, Hassan, if you can just attach the link to this PowerPoint, do download it and read this. There is some really good informative information here for everybody to soak in, but it gives you an idea of it's not just Muslims that do fast, there are, and maybe you might be surprised by medical advice. Now, as I mentioned in the previous slide, people who with underlying health conditions, people who have any sort of and challenges with fasting, diabetes, people who are not mentally stable, are not obliged to fast. and they need to seek advice from their GP. And there are more than enough concessions for those people. It's not meant to be difficult for anybody. But given the current pandemic with COVID-19, we've engaged with some of our colleagues in the health industry, in particular BIMA here, to ask the question really, as it says on the slide deck, is there any risks associated with fasting, and how much of a risk does that pose in terms of you getting the coronavirus? And actually what we've been told is that the evidence suggests that there is no risk, there is no heightened risk and possibility of you getting coronavirus as a result of you fasting. What I would say to the individuals on the call is that if you did want further information on that study and where that information has come from, the source of it, please do note that in that link. And if Hassan, you can add that to the message board as well, that would be useful.
I've done that.
Okay. But in a nutshell, that's where we stand with regards to fasting and the current pandemic and generally medical advice in general. Any further questions at this stage?
So no further questions at the moment, but I think the next section will be an apt one to cover Luan's one raised.
Okay, so a really interesting part, and I think for a lot of people this will provide a lot of answers possibly to their questions, or pose a lot of questions as a result of this section. So what is the impact of fasting on individuals? What does it mean to me to fast? What does it mean to have an employee who's fasting? What does it mean to have, how sensitive and gentle should you be with that person? Now, I'm not going to lie to you, fasting isn't easy, as we've already mentioned. Fasting for 16 hours or 18 hours a day isn't easy. The first few days takes a little bit of adjustment. So, people need to be mindful of that, as does the person who's also fasting, that they also need to be mindful that there could be a change in their behavior, which could have a negative effect on other people. So they themselves need to probably make others aware. But like I said earlier on, it takes a little bit of time to adjust. And once you're into the swing of things, honestly, you probably won't notice any difference. But generally speaking, what you might find is that some people are quieter than usual. They might be tired. Waking up in the middle of the night to have a meal and then trying to get back to sleep is sometimes difficult, especially depending on how much you end up eating. So for some people, it's not straightforward. And then the general feeling of being lethargic, having a lack of energy inside you. So I think it's really important that people are conscious and aware that sometimes these things do happen. But honestly, I reassure you that for the vast majority, they do adjust very quickly. For the vast majority, they're into the swing of things really quickly. But some people are different to others, and everybody has different ways and means of handling the situation. So what's best practice? What's our advice to line managers and colleagues who are working with those that are fasting? I think fundamentally, for me, the most single important bit of advice that I would give you is communication. Honestly, being able to have an open and frank conversation with people is so important. Being able to acknowledge that somebody is fasting, being aware that actually there might be a change in their routine, being aware that actually evening functions might not be appropriate for them, given the fact that it's a time to spend with the family, with the community in years gone by. It's a time where people want to come home and read the Quran and so on and so forth. So just be a bit mindful of maybe events and meetings that might be arranged around the month of Ramadan. But again, the business needs to function and it needs to operate as normal. So again, it comes back to communicating. You could make flexible working arrangements if at all that is possible. But again, I think in the main, most people are able to work within the arrangements that they have at work. The thing I'll probably say is that don't be afraid to eat, don't be afraid to eat, don't be afraid to even talk about food. Honestly, I've had it over the years where people will apologize to me, or they'll go away and hide. And we as Muslims do not intend to make things difficult for our colleagues and those around us. We are more than able and comfortable to have people eating and drinking. So by all means, do carry on. But it's honestly, it comes down to communication. There might be some people who are uncomfortable with it. Speak to them, understand their needs, and honestly, things will be a lot easier. And then the final slide for this portion is actually, depending on if you're having a team meeting, if you're delivering a briefing, and if you wanted to possibly share this slide deck, we've just listed some questions just to make sure that people are listening maybe within the meeting. And if you wanted just to check in with yourself, really, when can we eat and drink? Who are the people who are exempt from fasting, and so on and so forth. So that's just a little tool for you more than anything to use. Chose to. Hassan, any questions at this stage?
Yeah, so a couple of questions in. I think we can address them at this juncture. Before I go into them, just a shout out to everybody. We're probably running about 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes over time. So thank you for bearing with us. We hopefully will complete soon. And if you have any more questions, please do fire them into the chat. So one question is quite a good one based on a specific scenario. I have someone in my team who observes Ramadan each year, and every year towards the end of the 29-30 days, she literally looks exhausted due to the shift in sleeping patterns, and fasting is taking its toll. She is very dedicated. How much leeway is there for people when it comes to their well-being? She doesn't come under any of those categories you outlined. Can they take a break during Ramadan to recover? So that's a question for a specific colleague who's undertaking fasting, and maybe it's seems to be having some impact perhaps on their work productivity.
Sure. Really good question. And to be honest, if it was a he, you might have been referring to me once upon a time, because it can take its toll by the time you get to the 29th, 30th day. Like I said, it's a long day, and there's a lot involved. In answer to your question, I think the individuals themselves probably needs to be made maybe aware if there is a productivity issue. Maybe again, it comes back to communication and a conversation. It might feel as though it's a sensitive topic to have with a person, but again, I think they might appreciate it. But yes, of course, there's opportunities for them throughout the day to have to take a break. So where we might not be eating, for example, during lunchtime, we can go for walks. We can go into the multi-faith room and pray and take a break there if we needed to. There are moments where we can actually have more time on our hands in the evening. So people do regularly come home and take a nap, for example. So 6 o'clock, they might come home and actually take a nap before they have their evening suhoor meal. So there are ways and means that they can do that. And also at the weekends, given that actually they're probably less likely to be maybe outdoors and doing activities and what have you, it's a time to reboost and recharge your batteries. But in a nutshell, to be honest with you, by the end of Ramadan, that somebody can be, and it could be difficult for them. But I think that the key to it is to have that conversation with them and to see if there any adjustments could be made to support them in any way.
Thank you for that. And another sort of question which I can sort of batch together. You've touched on the one on mental health. What about coming to sort of the COVID-19 situation that we're living in, and fasting whilst if you're recovering from COVID-19 or self-isolating? Is there any specific guidance?
Okay, so to answer that question, a couple of things. One is that firstly, the individual should seek advice from their GP and from the doctor with regards to if it's appropriate for them to fast or if it's not, their recovery. So that's the first thing. So if somebody, for example, is on antibiotics, then I would imagine, and I don't know the actual official answer on this, but I would imagine that they would have to go through their course of antibiotics and they'd be unable to fast. But like I said, they need to seek the advice of their GP. The second thing is that Islam is a very spacious and easy religion. If somebody feels unhealthy and is not fit and able to fast for whatever reason, whether it be COVID-19 or another reason, and they are unable to do so, then they have the opportunity to not fast. But it's an individual decision, in all honesty. It really does come down to the individual. I don't think there is one hard and fast rule for anybody. I know there's people out there who do have underlying health conditions, but they've chosen to fast, and other people who don't have underlying health conditions, but who struggle with other things, have decided not to fast. So it's a very spacious religion, and it's up to the individuals to seek the relevant, to make the right decisions.
Okay, thank you for that. Last call. We'll just give it another moment or so. If anybody wants to take the chance just to type in any final questions, we can wait for a few more seconds. Nope, I think so far that is it. Of course, feel free to ask any questions offline. You can reach out to Muslims in Rail on LinkedIn. If you don't follow us already, you can follow us on LinkedIn, ask us any questions. Similarly, Instagram, email us as well, any questions. And if you have any specific scenarios of staff in your team who are perhaps struggling with fasting or work or both, and you'd like some further guidance, we'd happily be able to sort of signpost you to relevant sort of organizations. There's been one good question that's come in from Matthew as I've been speaking. Really good question, actually, very poignant for our rail and transport industry and construction. In terms of safety critical railway work, do you recommend anything specifically for those working in safety critical roles?
What I think needs to be done in this particular case is very much a risk-based approach. So under normal circumstances in any sort of activity, whenever somebody is undertaking a safety critical activity, there'll be a risk assessment and the normal procedures and protocols will be taken. Beyond that, I honestly go back to what I said earlier on. It is about communicating with the individual. Everybody is different. Everybody's attention span is different. Everybody's ability to be able to cope with hot weather is different. Though some people are able to just get by, having a couple of dates at 3:30 in the morning, and others need to have a full blown out meal. Some people are able to work in the outdoors, and other people need to be working in the air-conditioned office. So although the role might be safety critical, and you can undertake a risk assessment to determine whether this role requires somebody's full attention or not, what does need to be determined, though, is how the type of impact fasting in Ramadan has on that particular individual. And so having that conversation with them is really crucial.
Yep, absolutely. I'll just add to that. I've reshared the link to the British Islamic Medical Association guidance on Ramadan and fasting, which I think also refers to those working in roles wearing PPE. So would recommend you can browse that as well. Another good question coming from Matthew. With more colleagues working, I think he means more colleagues working from home, do you recommend taking any additional steps to help and monitor colleagues? So any further steps to help and monitor colleagues who are perhaps working from home and fasting?
Interesting question, actually, because actually, given the fact it is Ramadan, people are going to be fasting, and this year around that they'll be at home, you could argue that it might be a little bit easier for some people, that they're in the comfort of their own home, they're actually a lot more relaxed, maybe they have more time on their hands to do those things that are really important to them, given that it's the opportunity to build that relationship with Allah. I think you could do the routine things to check in with them as you would probably do on a normal day-to-day basis, just check that everything is going okay. I think for me personally, I've always found in the past that it really makes a difference when my line manager does ask me, how's Ramadan? How's your preparation going? You know, what did you eat last night? It just shows a little bit of care, really, more than anything. Is there anything that I can do? And in my conversation itself is to put my mind at peace, to know that actually there's somebody on the other line that actually acknowledges what I'm doing, appreciates my sacrifice, and is offered a helping hand. And I think, you know, given that people are working from home, it's probably that telephone conversation that's just needed.
Okay, thank you very much for that.
Just to let everybody know, that concludes my portion of the briefing. I just wanted to say thank you for allowing me to, giving me this opportunity to kind of share that information with you. This isn't the end of the session, so please don't leave yet. But I'm just going to hand over to Hassan, who's just going to share with you a little bit of information about how you can get involved this Ramadan.
Super, thank you, Abdul Wadud. He's right, it's not the end of the presentation, but this will only take 2 or 3 minutes. If I could implore you to spend just the last few moments just to hear a little bit more about Muslims in Rail, about us, and also how you can participate in Ramadan. So before we leave, so just a little bit more about sort of Muslims in Rail. If you could go to the next slide, please. So as mentioned at the start, Muslims in Rail aims to connect, grow and inspire people working or seeking a career in the rail industry, rail and transportation industry. So that's what we're about fundamentally. Next slide. And yes, we've got a sort of broad membership nationally, of almost around sort of 300 members and 500 plus LinkedIn followers. Our membership spans many different companies, I think sort of over 25 different companies. These are amongst the sort of core membership base for MIR, people who work in these organizations. And just a little word on sort of what we do, if you can move to the next slide, please. So we do quite a lot of things, actually. We've been around for the last 3 years. We are a non-profit social enterprise, a community interest company. We focus on social networking events. STEM volunteering, STEM education is really important to us, helping the next generation and those also younger who have joined the industry, help to guide them in this industry. Also outreach sort of initiatives, this one today, to try and educate sort of our fellow colleagues and employers about Ramadan and issues pertaining to our Muslim colleagues and staff. And also, of course, charity. And we are, speaking of charity, we are about to sort of, well, as Ramadan starts, we are launching our annual charity campaign, which is called Fast Money. So as the name suggests, fast money is really, really simple concept. It's about giving up your lunch money one day, skipping lunch for a day, and donating the proceeds to help needy people. We've been doing this for the last, I think, 3 or 4 years. We've raised around £5,000 for various children's charities in the past. And this year, because of the coronavirus pandemic and the massive need in the UK, we decided to make this charity work at home and support the National Zakat Foundation, who are helping individuals and families who are suffering from financial hardship and poverty as a result of the coronavirus crisis that we're involved in at the moment. So we really, to get involved, you don't have to fast. It might be fun to test yourself to keep a fast one day in Ramadan. It may seem daunting, 16, 17 hours to do that, but believe me, if you can survive almost, well, it's probably over a month of lockdown and isolation, fasting will be a piece of cake, honestly. It'll be fine. And if you can't do a full fast, you can do maybe a 12-hour one. But the point is, please do try and donate a little bit of money, whether it's £5 or £10 to Fast Money. The link is over there. Thank you for somebody who's kindly shared the link on the chat box. So please do visit and donate to Fast Money. And finally, thank you very much fasting a piece of cake, my quote for the day. Couldn't agree more. Don't ask us that in 1 or 2 days' time when we're probably sort of gasping for a glass of water or a cup of tea. In my case, a bit of caffeine. But no, thank you very much for everyone participating. We hope this has been a educational and illuminating briefing on Ramadan. And on behalf of myself, Hassan Ahmed, and Abdul Wadud Ahmed, no relation, from Muslims in Rail, thank you very much. God bless. And if you have any questions, reach out to us on LinkedIn, Instagram, or drop us an email. More than happy to help. But yeah, thank you very much. All take care. Bye-bye.